I think we're live. I'm not 100% sure here, Keith, but I think we are live. How you doing, man?
We're live somewhere. I'm good, man. How
Yes,
about yourself?
I'm good, man. No complaints. I'm excited to chop it up with you. For anyone who's new to myself or Keith, we talk a lot about crypto, finance, and I'm also big in the social media world, content space, psychology there. And so we're starting to show memes and markets to try to blend the world between memes, subculture, culture, and financial markets. And so that's the show, Keith. That's the show.
Yeah, man. It's fun to think about this because like this keeps on coming up, honestly. Like in reality, it feels like markets have unfortunately become a meme in a lot of ways.
Yes, memes run all markets, man.
Yeah, dude. Ever
So
since the Robin Hood thing, we've been in like a whole new world when it comes to financial markets and how it intersects with culture, man. So this will be fun, I think.
no, 1000%. And today we have a pretty controversial topic, depending on who you are. And actually, I'm not. This one's Keith's gonna ride or carry most of the weight here because he is a lot better versed in this space than I am. So today we're talking Ripple and XRP. So in future episodes, we're going to cover the big macro subjects that we think you should really care about as kind of an introductory to crypto before these prices really start moving. And I know that from an outsider who's not super deep into the XRP community, it seems like people are very passionate on either side of it, like either super pro or like super they hate it. So can you give me the rundown of all things XRP?
Yeah, man. Well, first I want to just kind of talk about like the cultural thing here because it's like people hate it, right? Like there's just this absolute hate for the community. But before anything, it's just a community, and that part I can also kind of understand because it's like um, you've got people who like very blindly just believe that XRP is going to go to like $10,000, right, one day, with no real context or reason behind it. And like I think that's one of the things that people get upset about. It's like um, I think there's also like this nature of like, well, there was a moment earlier this year, right, where there was this guy who goes by the name of Jack Mallers, if I can say that, and he put out like a whole video about how, Ripple is undermining the United States, and I didn't really fully, I don't remember exactly what he was saying, but the idea was that Ripple being a company, right,
Mm-hmm.
that is owning a large percentage of this token, right? That the problem was this, right? No one would be complaining if Ripple wasn't or excuse me, if XRP wasn't the third largest digital asset, right? Because there's tons of different cryptocurrencies where over 50% of the ownership is in the hands of the company, right? That created it. So, and also it's a little bit more nuanced where the company didn't create XRP and so on. But anyways, it's just I think that's kind of the first thing is like people hate it because it's winning in a way.
Okay.
Otherwise, it wouldn't matter. But when you have a company behind this token that's succeeding, the company is succeeding with or without the token. Another thing, right? Like people get so caught up in the XRP token, but like there's a whole company Ripple that's a multi-billion-dollar corporation. So let's say, okay, we'll talk a little bit more about how everything works. But before that, I want to say like let's say that no banks ever use XRP, right? Okay, fine. Well, the company Ripple doesn't need that to be the case to continue to exist and to thrive. And if that does become the case, if banks do use Ripple and XRP, well, they are a large owner of the token. So if that accrues any value to the token, then they would be incentivized to make that happen as shareholders, as responsibilities that they have to their shareholders, right? And also as individuals who want to make money. So I can step back for a second, but I just kind of wanted to get some of that stuff off my chest, I guess.
No. I think that's a great pre-context before we'll dive deep into what all that means. Because if you're not in the XRP community, like there's a lot of confusion in terms of okay, what is XRP? What is Ripple? Can you explain? You loosely did there, but can you explain the difference between XRP and Ripple?
Yeah, I think that's a great place to start. So back in, I think it was 2014, 2012 ish, there was the actual genesis event of the XRP ledger, let's say. And what happened there is there were a few people that came together. One of them was Jed McCaleb. He was pretty much like the original architect of this XRP ledger. Jed McCaleb, I think David Schwartz, and Chris Larson. I don't know how many of them were there at the real inception. I think Jed McCaleb was like the primary architect.
Okay.
A few years later, you have this company that comes about called Ripple Labs Inc. And what happens is the creators of the XRP ledger actually donate the XRP that they have created to the company Ripple. Okay.
Okay.
And so now you have a company that has pretty much control over all of this digital asset. Now it's all locked in an escrow. So there's an escrow where once every month, all of the XRP, actually not all of it, but there's a certain amount of the XRP that this company holds that they are able to essentially do whatever they want with. They can take that XRP and sell it either to institutions. Usually that's what they're doing. And or they cannot sell it and it can go back into the escrow after this like time period has elapsed. I'm not super versed on it, but that's the general mechanism that's happening. So Ripple has control, they have ownership rather of the escrow, okay, of the XRP ledger. Okay, first off, I didn't say one thing. There's 100 billion XRP that were created at the Genesis event of this ledger. And so Ripple now has around like 40 something billion XRP that they still have in this escrow. Every month, you know, the escrow is released essentially, and they can sell a certain amount of that XRP or it can go back into the escrow. So now, while the company Ripple does have they have ownership of the escrow, they don't have full control over the escrow, right? Like there's still this escrow mechanism that they have to deal with in order to be able to sell the XRP. And once again, I believe that there's a percentage of that they can actually take from. I'd have to do a little bit digger deeping on.
So you said that it can go back into escrow or they can sell it to the open public. What determines which?
Demand, essentially. Like think about it like you could say demand or it's up to them. Right. So they might not want to sell it. If they don't want to, they don't have to. Right. But they can if they would like to. Kind of like a treasury auction. It's like every whatever period, the treasury, right, can sell bonds to people. And Ripple can sell XRP at these auctions is almost how you could look at it, because either there's demand for that escrow at the time or the XRP at the time that the escrow releases, or there isn't. And so there could be that fight essentially to go and get as much of the XRP that they could. Now, I make that analogy off the rip, not even thinking about it, but I'm also, I'm intentionally want to draw the parallel because having that kind of a mechanism is very powerful. But anyways, moving forward. So you have 2014 or so, the company Ripple Labs is actually created. Their goal is to build out an ecosystem that will create use for this digital asset that was generated before the company even existed, called XRP. The XRP ledger, by the way, is a network, right? So it's a network, kind of like how you can look at how Bitcoin is a network. XRP has its own consensus mechanism, which basically just means that there's a specific way in which transactions over that network are agreed upon by the participants of the network. And that consensus mechanism is not proof of work, which is the one in Bitcoin. And because of that, it's not as energy intensive. Okay. So those are a couple of things to think about around like, what is XRP? What is the XRP ledger? Finally, too, the reason for creating the XRP ledger was to create this asset called XRP that could be used for cross-border transactions. Right now, you have Nostro accounts all over the world where banks literally sit foreign reserves in banks across the world just to sit there. It's like somewhere around $16 trillion that just sits in accounts for when people want to make international transfers.
Damn.
Those international transfers take days. They cost a lot of money. And it creates risk for the banks because they have to wait for this money to settle and they're taking FX risk as that's happening. The digital asset XRP, and I'll stop here, is designed to serve as an intermediary so that when you buy the XRP, you then send that XRP over, and then you can then sell it into the currency that you'd want to have locally wherever it is that you're going. Okay. So that's kind of how XRP works.
So why all of the like attention around it in terms of controversy? Because I know they were were they being investigated by the SEC, or what was the deal with all that?
Yeah, so I think it was at the very end of 2020, Jay Clayton, on his final day at the SEC, files a case against XRP, excuse me, against Ripple in the executives of the company. So that case was mostly about whether or not Ripple had engaged in unregistered securities transactions, okay, where essentially they have been selling a security that was not registered with the SEC, because when you sell securities within certain constraints, you're supposed to register them with the Securities and Exchange Commission. That way they know, hey, there's these people out here raising money from investors. And if they don't report that, then basically it puts you at a higher level of scrutiny, because if you start doing something scammy, the SEC is right there looking at you. So they want to know when people are raising money. So yeah, that's what happened there.
Okay. And so then that suit has since been dropped, right? The investigation, they're all good now.
So it's been a whole thing. So what really happened was, like, in 2023, I think there was an initial ruling where what the judge determined was that, I'm gonna say that I don't have the full details, but basically there were transactions that were securities transactions that took place that were unregistered, but the asset itself is not a security. Okay. And this is an important distinction in securities law, because there are transactions that represent securities transactions, but that doesn't mean that the underlying asset being transacted is a security. For instance, I could tell you that I'll sell you a bunch of gold in the future, but that gold is going to come from my efforts of mining, right? So there's the Howey test. It's the investment in a common enterprise with the expectation of profits on behalf of others' efforts, or something like that. I think I said that right. I might have messed that up. But so anyways, so did XRP itself fit into this Howey test? Or did just these transactions where Ripple was selling XRP to banks or institutions, were those transactions securities transactions? The court said that those transactions were. And then what happened was they actually went through an appeal process. Okay. And then I think what happened is that this appeal that has been going on for the past 2 years got dropped. I might have missed a step in there, but that's essentially what kind of just happened this year.
Okay, got it. Yeah, and that's one of the biggest things with crypto and why it's about to become such a massive deal, in my opinion, is because they're finally putting rules to the game, right? As we've talked about on podcasts that we've had in the past, where they're getting the rules for the road set up and actually put into place. That, like, I remember you said that there's an absurd amount of people working on this to get stuff out incredibly quickly. And we should do an episode on that in the next week or two, explaining all of that, explaining the different things in terms of what is a security versus what's not a security. I asked ChatGPT for what is the definition of a security, and let me see, legal. Yeah, so the legal definition apparently is the Securities Act of 1933 defines security very broadly. It notes stocks, bonds, options, and any investment contract. Courts use the Howey test, which is what you said, to decide if something is an investment contract, an investment of money in a common enterprise with a reasonable expectation of profit from others' efforts. Okay, so that happened with XRP. How did it get to a point now where it has very much like a cult-like community? Like, from an outsider, because I'm not really into XRP, I see the people and they're like really, really into it. So can you explain to me the origins of that?
You know, it's funny because I've only been around since 2017, but I think that was when, for me, it was already there then. Like, there was already just this like viewpoint that this asset and this company kind of comes from a place that is potentially a little bit deeper than what it may seem, right? Like, how many of these cryptocurrencies have a company that is there, period? Not a foundation, but a full company that's actually backing it.
Yeah.
Ripple. Ripple's the only one that the SEC could just go out and sue as a company. Right? So there's just a certain level of like, why was XRP always the third largest digital not always, but once it was there, pretty much it was the third largest digital asset the whole time. Right?
100%.
So I think that's kind of part of it, is like, when you look at the mechanism as well of like it kind of being a way to upgrade the fiat system versus trying to overthrow it, it kind of starts to, you can connect dots and say, well, maybe this came from somewhere, deeper than what it looks like.
And do you have any sort of guesses, any tinfoil hat stuff as to where it came from?
you know, I mean, people say like the powers that be kind of a thing, you
Okay.
know. Um,
Man, it seems like these powers that be are everywhere, and I do wonder if it's something that's from our creation, or is it actually something that is there. And I go back and forth all the time. Sometimes I think I'm like, oh, you're being way too conspiratorial here. Like, there's no way it's this crazy. And then I see something happen where I'm like, no, I think maybe I should keep that tinfoil hat on. Like, like there's just so many things. Right when I'm about to take it off, something happens where I'm like, whoop, right back on. But yeah, XRP is the third largest digital asset on the planet right now. And so in terms of achieving their goal, so I think why, from an outsider's perspective, why a lot of people could rally behind this is because that's something that people can understand, and they can understand the concept, but they also know the scope of that problem if solved well, and they're the primary way of doing it would be absolutely massive. So I could see people getting behind that. I think that most movements are created through narratives, and XRP's narrative has a solid one. And I actually think the fact that they were investigated by the SEC since it's been dropped or whatever, that's actually probably more of a pro to get people more rallied behind the cult-like movement of XRP. What's been what I still don't grasp why people think it can go up to like thousands of dollars per token though. Can you explain to me like who's the first person saying that, or like how this came to be? Like, it seems crazy to me.
Yes, so there's actually something really funny about this for someone who might not know. There's this thing called if you're new to XRP, you might have seen like the number 589 somewhere.
Okay.
And so this number came from a Riddler. Okay, this is another thing. I haven't talked about this, but ever since even 2017, there's been these Riddlers. Okay.
What the hell's a Riddler?
So like, okay, this is a meme. So essentially, like, there's these profiles out there that have like dropped hints or like weird little like riddles about like what's gonna happen with the XRP ledger.
Okay.
One of them is called Bearable Guy 123.
Okay. And have any of them been accurate?
Well, there's too vague. It's not really like,
okay.
Yeah.
So you can't be wrong. It's like when you go to a psychic and they say the most vague shit you've ever heard. It's like, well, yeah, I have a cousin or a brother, like that kind of stuff.
Exactly.
Okay.
So you never know what they're actually talking about. There's some like Mr. Poole is another one like who like would drop dates.
I see him here. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like, nah, bro, like he's been wrong every time for sure. But it's very interesting, right? There was a graphic that came out, I would say 2016, and it was like a graphic of our current president in the United States and like a bunch of people like behind bars and all this thing. And there's like some like mix between like this XRP thing and like QAnon almost. Like, I don't want to say it's like that, but it's like there's a little bit of crossover in that.
Okay.
And so it's like a whole thing there's a ton of different Riddlers, but Bearable Guy 123 is the original one, and a lot of people speculate on who it could actually be. Some people have speculated it's David Schwartz, the CTO of Ripple. Some have speculated that it's even someone like Elon Musk's brother.
Okay. And the internet is crazy. And I think that why crypto will explode even further is because these stories that are honestly just good TV have reached a point where like you and I are talking about them, right? And it makes it more interesting because now we actually have stuff to talk about that's not just chart go up, chart go down, because as we've seen from previous cycles, that doesn't keep people around. Stories keep people around, right? Drama keeps people around. And it seems like there's ample amounts of both of those things within XRP. So, okay, let's break down why $1,000 is really unlikely.
Yes. So one of the things to think about, or that people use to like kind of like bring expectations back down, is this concept of market capitalization. And this is something that a lot of people get wrong or don't really fully understand in the crypto space. So to paint the picture here, like it doesn't matter that the price of a token is like sub 1 cent. Okay. You have to compare that to the actual circulating supply of the token.
I know.
So, and I still have this conversation like a lot.
Bro, every day, man. Every day. Every time I show people crypto and I show them the chart, they're instantly like, they're drawn to XRP. They're because like first actually they go to Tether because they're like, oh, that's $1. Like that's easy to grasp like that. And then I explain what it does and they're like, okay, never mind that. XRP. XRP is what I want, and I think that's a huge bonus for it too. But sorry,
yeah, no, dude, that's what it's all about. Like, I'll just tell a quick story. This was back in 2021. I at this point, like, I'm pretty deep in the game. I've done some crazy studying. I'm also up a crazy amount. We're in the middle of the bull run, and this
You
kid's
feeling
talking to
good?
me. You said what?
You're feeling good.
Yeah, I'm feeling good. This kid starts talking to me about this thing. At the time, it was called Safe Moon. Are you familiar with
Oh,
Safe
I know
Moon?
about Safe Moon. I was in there. I
Okay.
made some money and I lost some money.
Okay. And this kid, he was, look, we're all kids at the time, but he was like talking to me. He was like, dude, buy Safe Moon. Like, if it goes up to $1, I'm going to be a millionaire. Like, you got to buy it. And he was dead serious, right? And
That's
I'm
scary.
like, oh no, this is funny. But I kept my mouth shut. I was like, dude, I'm sitting up crazy amounts of money. Don't talk to me about what to do with my crypto. but it was just a funny moment where I'm like, okay, we got people coming in. They have no idea what they're talking about. They're trying to tell me what to do because of they don't understand market capitalization, and that's the point of the cycle that we're in. By the way, if people start doing that, that's what part of the cycle we're in, guys. Just so you know.
Fantastic point.
But yeah, so market capitalization in stocks, for instance, you have the amount of shares outstanding that are in the market, and you multiply that times the price of the actual stock itself. That will give you the market capitalization of the company. It gives you an idea of essentially the size of the company itself. What is the overall value of this entire enterprise in the world is what market cap is supposed to tell you. Now, in crypto, technically, like, there's different ways of going about it. The way that we typically do it today is we look at the total circulating supply of the token. A lot of the times, not all of the supply of the token is actually fully circulating. There might be some different mechanisms that bring it into existence. So you also have the fully diluted market cap, which means if 100% of the asset is in circulation, what is that market capitalization in that place? But for now, we use circulating supply. So anyways, the point of so if you get a $1,000 XRP, right? Like, what needs to be the market cap of XRP at that point? It needs to be in like the trillions and trillions of dollars. I'm not even sure what it is.
I'll look it up. If
Yeah.
XRP hits $1,000, $1,000, what would the market cap be? And that's really, before we get back into it, like, if you're watching this, that's these little things that seem so dumb when we say it out loud are really why most people make bad decisions. Because yes, in theory, when we're talking and it's a logic-based conversation, of course they sound stupid, but when you're on your own, or even when you're influenced by other people, emotion is driving the car. And so if you're not aware of the cognitive biases that you already carry and how they impact financial decisions, you will make dumb decisions. You will join cults you don't know what you're a part of, and you will either sell too early or buy way too late. Like, it happens all the time. And we're only saying this from a place of having lost heart. Like, we should do that actually the next episode or two, Keith. You and I should go specifically into our crypto investing journey, like, to what you're cool sharing.
Yeah.
And then, because we have a similar story, and I think that there's a lot to learn from it. And I think that all the losses were for a purpose. And so if I can help people not lose like I did, I'd be really happy about that. So I have the number here now. So if XRP were to hit $1,000 a token, it would be about 59.7 trillion using the circulating supply.
Boom. So that'd be the largest thing, pretty much, right? Like, the stock market in the United States is worth, I think, around $20 trillion, just as an example.
Yeah.
So now I want to argue the other side of this.
Okay. Hit me with it.
Because at the end of the day, if this is supposed to solve that, for instance, cross-border payments problem of $16 trillion in capital that's just sitting, well, if it solves that problem, let's just say, right, let's just imagine that solving that problem means that we have a $16 trillion market cap. Let's just imagine.
Yeah.
Now, the thing about that is that it doesn't really work that way, for one. So there's a couple things to talk about with that. Another thing that people don't understand about cryptocurrency and the market caps is that there's this thing called the multiplier effect. So just because the market cap of something is 16 trillion, or let's say 58 trillion, doesn't mean that there's $58 trillion that has gone into this thing. No. That's the valuation of it. Okay, so instead, if someone is valuing that thing at $58 trillion, the trades that are taking place are what are going to determine the actual value. Not the price at which the trades are taking place is what matters, not how much money is going in. So when I buy something, the multiplier effect is this. For every dollar that goes in, what impact does that have on the actual price, essentially, or the market cap? Right. So So that's what the multiplier effect is $1 in doesn't equal $1 in market cap. $1 in can equal $3 in market cap. Okay. And in crypto, the Bank for International Settlements has done some actual research on what the multiplier is in crypto. And I don't have it on the top of my head, but we could maybe do some research on that.
Yeah, no, 100%. And that's really important to grasp, because that allows you to at least start to ask the right questions to understand how things can move so much. And that's also why, if you are betting on the right things and doing your research, that's why people can make 100x's, 1000x's from being in small projects if they can be there before the money moves. Because when people start to make a lot of money, the greed starts going everywhere, and it does flow into a lot of different things. And so if you can be 2 or 3 steps ahead of that, you can turn a very small amount of money into a very large amount of money. And obviously you're taking on way more risk in doing that, but that's possible because way less money needs to flow in to make that kind of move. Like with Ripple, if we want to get to $1,000, like that's just an obscene amount of money. For context for people, Apple's the company I usually go to because everyone knows that Apple is huge. So Apple's market cap currently is 3.55 trillion USD. And so like think about how many orders of magnitude larger 59.7 trillion is versus 33.55. Like that would just have to be so absolutely massive, which again, I'll never say never. I think any of this stuff that we're looking at, the fact that we're even talking about crypto on the internet right now is kind of like a crazy concept. I'm sure if we went back 20 years ago, people would be like, you're not going to be doing that. But here we are, and we're doing it. But for Ripple in particular, sorry, XRP, this shit has really, it's one of the only coins besides Bitcoin and Ethereum. I'm sure it's because it's the 3rd largest market cap, but it really has reached cultural significance, in my opinion. Like Big Sean, I think it was, who was just talking about it at his concert. Did you see that?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, there's not much out there that's had that level of cultural significance for sure, man. Big Sean, it's crazy, man. There's so much history to this too. Ashton Kutcher, back in like
he was involved
2016 or something, he donated like $1 million in XRP to Ellen one day, random, right?
That's a weird mix of people there, and with a lot of shady stuff attached to their name.
Not to put this guy in that same category, but Scooter Braun, having met with Ripple on multiple occasions. I believe he's actually an investor in the company, if I'm not mistaken. That's another thing. Andreessen Horowitz is an investor in Ripple. There's a lot of just like certain things, guys, where it's like, you kind of just watch. And this stuff is old now. Like this stuff is old news that people won't ever know, really, because it's just baked in the history that some of these things occurred.
Totally. I'm seeing it here now. I said Ashton Kutcher gives Ellen 4 million XRP. Yeah, it's very, very odd. It just seemed like there's some very powerful people involved with this all across the board, which usually is a sign that it's probably going to work out, because if you paid attention to anything, like the rich get richer, and the people that are in power, they typically win. And so if there's a lot of people involved in it, then that's probably a pretty good indication that it's going to be, at least have a chance to work out. So what else does Ripple do as a company besides trying to use XRP to solve that international payments problem?
Yeah, so Ripple is a software company, from what I understand. They sell software solutions to banks around the world. 90-something% of their customers have always been international, because they're solving a cross-border payments problem in the terms of using software to help solve these problems. Back in 2020-ish, they had they used specific terminology around how they were doing this. They had like X current, X via, and all this other stuff, and then they had XRP. And it was like, you can send a message without using XRP, but you can also send the message using XRP as well. That's kind of like how you look at it. And they framed this concept of using XRP as on-demand liquidity. They've kind of moved away from that branding for whatever reason. But the idea is that you have XRP that's sitting there that you can tap into to get access to any other fiat currency. And you call that on-demand liquidity because you have this pot essentially where you can get liquidity in other currencies. Now, I'll quickly outline how I think that's going to be playing out into the future now, because we have now a stablecoin on XRP called RLUSD.
That's what I was just about to ask you about. So that's awesome.
Perfect. So that, to me, is the very first step in actually making this mechanism actually work. None of us have really known, in my eyes, it hasn't been clear how this was actually going to come into fruition. But now it seems to me that these stable coins are going to be the way that happens. Because what we're going to do here is we're going to have a stable coin in each and every fiat currency, right? And you're going to continue to build liquidity in those stable coins versus XRP. Now you actually have a digital form of these of these fiat currencies that you can use on the XRP ledger to create this settlement process that we've been talking about this entire time. So, so we're still so early as well. It's another thing that a lot of people don't want to admit. But until these stablecoins are like full-fledged a thing, and we have liquidity across every single stablecoin pair in each currency or corridor is what they've called them, then like I don't think that we have that future that we've been outlining until that has happened.
Yeah, totally. And there's I do think that our payment systems are going to be radically changed and faster than a lot of us even can conceptualize, because there's an urgency for it and there's a serious need for so many other reasons that we'll dive into on future episodes, I'm sure. But with XRP, then we talked about why $1,000 is probably an unrealistic thing. That's definitely a good rallying mechanism, but it's not accurate. If I were to pressure you to say a altcoin season height price, like what's the highest you could see XRP realistically going this cycle?
Yeah, and I don't think $1,000 is unrealistic. I don't think it's unrealistic in the future, right? I just want to make it clear.
Okay.
Yes, this cycle, I don't know. I think a lot of people have pointed out different targets. They've talked about like $10. They've talked about $30 being like the max that we would get to in this cycle. I think those are still crazy numbers. I don't necessarily expect to see anything anywhere near $30 in this cycle. But yeah, those are like the people that are at least like actually, looking at the numbers and like trying to make sense realistic. Of things.
Yeah, because things do get crazy during an altcoin season, so nothing is completely off the table. If you were to really go back in time and talk about before things moved with people that were actively involved in crypto, like they wouldn't have even gone as high as a lot of the things did. But now in retrospect, they're like, yeah, of course it was going that. I think hindsight's always 2020, and sometimes you got to be bold and have conviction in your plays. And it seems like people are very convicted in XRP, like they really believe in that movement. But there's a lot of like conspiracies attached to XRP that we've touched on briefly here. But like one that I've seen headlines for is that like XRP has a plan to like overtake the dollar and stuff like that. Can you speak to any of those?
Yeah, I've talked about it a little bit on my channel too. It's like this idea that potentially this system where, once again, we have all these different digitized fiat or tokenized fiat currencies on the XRP ledger. Okay, great. Now, on this XRP ledger, you can also tokenize any other asset. So let's say one country wants to tokenize gold. Okay, or rather not a country, but let's say we have tokenized gold on the ledger. Yeah. And when one country wants to assign essentially or allocate their digital currencies to essentially be backed by this gold that's also tokenized, they could like issue it, 1-to-1 for gold. They could say 1-for-2 for gold or whatever. They could do that on the XRP ledger. And so with that being said, there's a system in place here that would allow any sort of a new form of digital currency to be created based upon the tokenization of the assets on the ledger. You could back currencies with whatever you own or whatever you want to back it with. So, I kind of forgot the question was, okay, so with that being said, like Ripple is a United States-based company, period. Point blank, period. They do have a large portion of XRP. The question really is if you issued these types of currencies on this XRP ledger, would that accrue value to XRP? You need XRP, even if you didn't need XRP for this cross-border settlement process. Okay, cool. If you were going to issue currencies on the XRP ledger, you need XRP to pay fees on the ledger. The fees are pretty small. They're basically negligible, but that still creates some level of demand for the token, right? You want to keep your costs at zero. So if you own the token, then your costs are much lower. And in fact, if the price of that token goes up and you own the token, not only are you now paying lower fees because you own the token and rather the fees become negligible, but also you're making money, right? You're gaining value because the price of the token is going up and you own it. So anyways, the question would have to be, I guess, if there were some grand plot to like replace the US dollar with XRP, then the system to do that exists. And the stablecoin RLUSD that is now on the XRP ledger is definitely a very primary step to kind of either replacing the US dollar or enforcing, right, the demand for treasuries, right, that has come in through the Stablecoin Act, the Genius Act, and things like that. So There's plenty of different stablecoins. There are a lot of stablecoins that have more traction than RLUSD. But once again, when we're talking about this mechanism of actually using XRP potentially as an asset that settles as a bridge currency between all of these other fiat currencies that have now been tokenized, then RLUSD sits in a specific spot to create demand for US treasuries, but then also the XRP token in general could be valued based upon this entire system being built on the XRP ledger. Hopefully that answers the question a little bit. But to get to the conspiracy is what I would say here is like, okay, XRP has this escrow, but they have control over that escrow for the most part. So the big conspiracy that people have out there is like, oh, well, XRP is either going to be like that escrow is either going to be like donated to the United States or even potentially confiscated by the United States. So that's like the tinfoil hat version of like how this becomes like a United States thing, I guess.
Got it. That makes total sense. And it does seem where crypto is going to go, that whether it's publicly announced or whether it's done behind closed doors, that the US government will be more and more involved with a lot of things crypto. Like if you look at these Bitcoin reserve companies and all that stuff, like if Bitcoin becomes what I think it can become, it almost becomes, I don't know if dangerous is the word, but insane to think about how much power a Bitcoin reserve company like Sailor Strategy could have if it stops being pegged to the dollar. Like where does it end? And I think that's something that is not too dissimilar from, I guess, why people think that XRP could be a plot to take over the dollar. But it'll be super interesting to watch. Like all this stuff is so fascinating. It's moving really, really fast, as we've talked about before, in terms of actually getting pushed into law. When does all this stuff become real? Do you know if there's been dates?
So I think the big thing with the Stablecoin Act is they've given like stablecoin issuers a certain amount of time. I would look at that maybe to see whatever the grace period to make sure that they're actually participating in, or excuse me, adhering to the rules. We just saw this week that Tether just launched a new version of Tether called the US version of Tether. I forget what it's called. And that's a really big deal because it signals, right, that regular Tether doesn't qualify under these rules, you know.
So USDT didn't qualify?
Let me. That's why else would they create a new version? I guess is the real, like the thought, rather. The problem with Tether is that there's not enough transparency around the reserves. They do their own kind of reporting on it. They don't have like a proper.
And we always know that's
audit.
good.
Yeah,
when you do an internal audit, that's always trustworthy.
They do attestations, but no like external audit, I believe is what it is. So,
okay.
Anyways, and there's a whole conspiracy. That's a whole episode, by the way, is the conspiracy around Tether and how it's been used to prop up the entire Bitcoin price for all these years. That is a conspiracy that's well alive to this day.
Okay. Yeah, man, the whole thing is a lot of fun. That's why we started the show. But for XRP in particular, is there anything else that you think we should talk about?
Honestly, man, I think that's pretty much the major stuff.
Okay.
One of my favorite people to watch about this is the Black Swan Capitalist. I forget his name at the moment, but he goes deep into how like the system might collapse, and like that's when XRP would matter. Be the thing.
Okay. Does he talk about this on Twitter, YouTube?
He's actually pretty big on Twitter, but also on YouTube as well.
Yeah, it looks like his name is Versan. I would butcher the last name, Ajara. Probably butchered that. So
yeah, that's him.
If I did, sorry about that. But yeah, hopefully we can get him on in the future.
Oh, that'd be sick.
Is someone worth talking to? But yeah, then if that's everything with Ripple, I think you can wrap it up there. I guess the last question I would ask for you is, how do you suggest people come to a place where to decide if they should or shouldn't invest into Ripple themselves? Because people do follow herds, right? So how do people make their own decision on that?
You just got to do your research, man. You got to see, follow the lines, see what's going on. I think the problem is that people just put money at stuff because people tell them to, but sometimes like that works. You know what I mean? So it's like, you know, I think people are just going to make their mistakes. At least that's how I felt now. It's like I've made my mistakes. I learned my lessons. If I listened to people who had better wisdom, I would have done better. But I had to learn that life lesson first too, you know?
Totally. You got to feel the pain behind the lesson to really make it stick. But in terms of Ripple, like, do you recommend Like, is there a white paper people can read? Like, what sources do you recommend reading?
Yeah, they probably have a white paper out there. I'd also go to like the XRP Ledger website and like get a better feel of like what it is that they're building there, and like interact with the ledger and stuff like that.
Cool.
Also, there's a guy named Quincy Jones, and he'd be cool to have on as well. He talks really more in depth about like the mechanics of the XRP Ledger, as well as he's a developer, so he actually has done some development on that, and also on the XDC Foundations thing. So yeah.
Cool. Like all right. Well, go read that. Go do your research, people. And we'll be back on Thursday. We'll be live again with a new topic. So definitely subscribe to Memes and Markets. We'll be bringing cultural news to you, financial market news, all the good stuff where it intersects. And yeah, we're talking Bitcoin soon. So if you're interested in Bitcoin, its origin, all that stuff, definitely click subscribe.
Gotta subscribe.
You gotta do it. All right, Keith. I'll see you on Thursday. I'll see everyone watching this on Thursday too.
Awesome.
Peace.